The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar entitled 2021 MIPS Participation Highlights and Important Updates. Today's presenter is Bruce Mackey, Alterum's Regulatory and Incentive Program Analyst. My name is Liz Jones, and I am today's moderator. Before we begin, I have a few housekeeping items to touch on. A PDF copy of today's slides can be downloaded right now from your GoToWebinar interface. We will be keeping everyone muted during today's presentation. If you have a question, please type it into the questions box in your GoToWebinar interface, and we will address it during the Q&A. Because of the large number of attendees for today's webinar, we may not have time to answer all of the questions. If we do not address yours during today's broadcast, you will receive an answer through email. Also, a link to the recording of this presentation will be available soon on the events page of our website at www.qppresourcecenter.org/events. Today, Bruce will review the 2021 participation rules of MIPS, providing general program education, as well as reviewing the notable changes in this fifth performance year. He will discuss eligibility requirements and reporting options, the extreme and uncontrollable circumstances policy, notable updates to each of the 4 performance categories, changes for MIPS APM participants, as well as review the 2021 minimum performance threshold and subsequent payment adjustments. Finally, he'll end by explaining how you can still receive free assistance to help you participate. Following the presentation, with any time remaining, Bruce will answer any questions posed by the attendees. Please note, the information you will hear in this broadcast is current as of today and is only intended to be a general summary. With that, I will turn things over to Bruce.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you everyone for joining us today to go through the 2021 MIPS participation highlights and important updates. Why don't we jump right in? So obviously we're here talking about the quality payment program, and it's 2 tracks of participation. We have the MIPS track and the advanced APMs track. Really, I'm not going to be talking about the advanced APMs track at all today. We're going to focus just on the MIPS track and really the sort of sub-track that I like to kind of call out, this the MIPS APMs participants. It's sort of this third track that bridges the gap between the MIPS track and the advanced APMs track, where folks are in some type of APM, but it's not an advanced APM, so they find that they are still needing to participate in MIPS, but they're doing it through their ACO or their alternative payment model, as it were. So I'll be focusing really just on the MIPS track, and then how for those MIPS APMs folks as well, because they are also participating in MIPS. We'll talk about a very important new part of that participation as well. So we have the category weights that all contribute to that MIPS final score. That MIPS final score is, of course, where, what you're being compared against. A perfect score is a 100 or 100%. The 4 MIPS performance categories always add up to that 100%, but the weighting of those has shifted really every year of the program thus far. As we roll into 2022, we should see the final shift in these performance category weights. But here for 2021, here's what they look like. We have the quality category at 40% or 40 points, cost at 20%, improvement activities at 15%, promoting interoperability at 25%. So depending on how you score in each of those categories, they're all lumped together to create your MIPS final score. That final score that gets compared against the annually set MIPS performance threshold, which is 60 points for this year, to determine if the participant, who we call eligible clinicians or ECs in this program, or group, receives a positive, negative, or neutral payment adjustment. So if your MIPS final score is not at least 60 points in 2021, you will receive some sort of penalty, and we'll talk about what those penalties are a little deeper into the slide deck. We'll touch base very briefly on MIPS eligibility. I say briefly because really nothing has changed from last year to this year. So we did not see any changes to the MIPS eligible clinician types. That is different for next year, so just keep in mind there are a couple of new MIPS ECs next year, but not this year. Everything is the same thus far. No changes to the low volume threshold for MIPS eligibility. We've got those same voluntary and opt-in participation options as we had last year, and I think for a few years now. And also no changes to the reporting level options. And I don't expect to see any changes in the future here either. You can still participate as an individual clinician or as a group, which is defined as kind of all of those eligible clinicians under a single tax ID number, or a virtual group. We do see some significant changes that you need to be aware of due to COVID-19. So similar to last year, we have some of those same options available to us this year. I have a couple of slides on this particular topic as we talk about the extreme and uncontrollable circumstances exception application. There's another slide that's going to get into the how CMS is going to automatically apply this to some folks too. But here on this slide, we're talking about kind of applying for that extreme and uncontrollable circumstances exception. And what this means is, similar to last year, there's a bunch of different reasons why you might need to apply for an EUC. COVID-19 is, of course, the most popular one and the one that's being used the most right now for obvious reasons. But this would allow you to take a pass on 1, 2, 3, or even all 4 of the MIPS performance categories for this year. So some folks are able to generate their promoting interoperability data and maybe their improvement activities, but maybe their quality data is sort of a mess due to all of the problems that they're having around COVID-19, or again, there are other reasons as well. So you might consider putting in an application to take a pass and have certain performance categories re-weighted, meaning, hey, CMS, we really don't want to be scored, or we can't be scored in the, let's say, cost category this year because we have concerns at how the COVID-19 pandemic has negatively affected our cost category scores. So we'd really like to just kind of take a pass this year. Don't score us in that performance category. Have it re-weighted to 0, and that weighting then shifts to any remaining categories that you are going to submit in. You can actually apply this, put in this application to take a pass on the whole program for this year as well. But we'll talk about the automatic applicability of that on the next slide. So if you fall into this category, meaning you'd really like to put in some data because you've got some data that's good, some data that isn't so good, you might consider putting in this application to take a pass. You have until the end of the year to decide that, so it's not anything that you have to do right now, but just something to keep in mind that you do have this option available to you again this year. And really it goes beyond that. So recently, just last week actually, on the 10th, CMS announced that they are once again applying the MIPS automatic extreme and uncontrollable circumstances policy for this program year, again, in response to COVID-19. So we saw this happen last year as well. It took them most of the year to decide whether they were going to do it again this year. But again, just last week, they announced that they are again applying this automatically to all eligible participants. However, note that this policy only applies to MIPS eligible clinicians who are eligible to participate in MIPS as individuals. The automatic extreme and uncontrollable circumstances policy does not apply to groups, and that has some very important ramifications that I'll get to in just a second. So as an individual clinician, even if your participation is mandatory this year, meaning that as an individual clinician, you have exceeded that low volume threshold. So if you're going to the qpp.cms.gov website and looking at their eligibility information, and they've got the little green check mark next to that clinician and for your clinic, meaning that they've exceeded that low volume threshold and they must participate or they'll take a penalty. It's different now with this automatic EUC. No action is needed for individual ECs to take advantage of this automatic EUC. So even though their participation looks mandatory, because of the applicability of this automatic EUC, if they do not submit any MIPS data at all, there will be automatic reweighting of all 4 performance categories to 0%, and the clinician will receive a neutral payment adjustment, meaning nothing will happen to their Medicare reimbursement rate a couple years from now. If they submit any data on a particular MIPS category, that data will be scored, and it's going to override this automatic EUC for them. So you're kind of signaling to CMS by sending in that MIPS data that you don't want to or don't need to take advantage of the automatic EUC. Your data still looks good. You want to go ahead and send it in. There's a lot of cases to be made to still do that. And I highly suggest that you do that. Certainly, if your data looks great, go ahead and override that automatic EUC and get that data in, because there's still some meager financial gains to be had on the other side. But if you can, send it in. If 2 performance categories are scored for any individual clinician, they will receive a MIPS final score. So just keep that in mind as well. You cannot get a MIPS final score by sending in or by reporting on only 1 performance category. CMS has to be able to score you in 2 performance categories in order to receive a MIPS final score. And note, if you are reporting MIPS quality data via the claims process, meaning you're putting those quality data codes on claims to get credit for your MIPS work, CMS automatically scores that data at the individual and group level. Very few people realize that CMS has been doing that behind the scenes. Whether you intend to report as a group or not, whether you've signaled to CMS that you would like to be scored as a group or not, they are scoring your group data, your quality data that you're submitting at the group level. So due to the EUC policy, this has no effect on those individual ECs, even though CMS has received that claims data on for that individual clinician. The automatic EUC is going to override that. So you're not kind of penalized, or that option's not taken away from you because you've been submitting claims data. However, because that automatic EUC does not apply at the group level, if you do not want this claims data to be scored at that group level, you must submit a separate EUC application. This has caused significant issues in prior years. Last year we saw this issue. It happened again this year, where folks thought they were taking advantage of that automatic EUC, but they had been submitting data on the quality category through their claims process. So even though they didn't signal to CMS, they didn't give CMS any additional data, CMS still scored that quality data at the group level without their knowledge, which then generated a group score. So we had a big issue this year with scores again, because folks that didn't intend to be scored at the group level got scored at the group level. That because it was meager data that was sent in, they ended up not meeting last year's performance threshold, and the group ended up taking a penalty. Again, big issues. So this issue has been corrected as of next year, but it will happen again this year if you do not take action. So next year, CMS has changed the rules. They've confirmed that in the recently released final rule, where they are not going to automatically score that claims data at the group level unless you signal to CMS that you want to be scored at the group level. You would do that by sending in group level PI category or group level improvement activities. But again, that does not take place this year. That's not till next program year. So we still have 1 more year to watch out for this issue. So again, if you would like to be, you want to take advantage of this automatic EUC at the individual level, you do not have to take any action, except if you have been submitting your claims data or your quality category data via the claims process. If you do not click that link on your screen and submit that group level EUC application to take a pass on the quality category, that claims data is going to be scored at the group level, and your whole group, all of your clinicians in your tax ID might inadvertently take a penalty because that group data, that one category isn't going to be enough to exceed that performance threshold. So make sure that you are not in that category again this year. Again, I know a lot of tax IDs got hit last year with these penalties when they didn't realize that CMS was going to score that data. Another change for this year, we saw this announced, I think, a couple of months ago. CMS is, they've taken away facility-based scoring for this year. I know this is also devastating to a lot of tax IDs out there who have relied on facility-based scoring for their clinicians, for their hospital-based clinicians. Unfortunately, CMS, due to COVID-19, had to suppress some of the measures within the value-based purchasing program for the hospitals. The VBP score, the value-based purchasing score, is what fed the facility-based scoring option here under the MIPS track. So because of that measure suppression on the hospital side, they unfortunately have to suspend facility-based scoring for this program year. So I would suggest that if these facility-based clinicians are not able to generate their own practice level or clinic level quality data that is decent and worth sending in, you probably want to go ahead and submit that extreme and uncontrollable circumstances exception application to request reweighting of your quality and cost performance categories, just so you don't inadvertently take a penalty again because you needed to report or you want to report, but you don't have that option to use facility-based scoring for this calendar year. Hopefully, we'll have facility-based scoring available to us again next year. We will see. All right, let's roll into the different four performance categories, and we'll just do kind of a quick review of the rules within that category, and I'll highlight any changes from last year to this year as well. So just the basics. I would highly recommend, if you are new to any of these performance categories, grab the quick link or the quick start guide. I've got the link for the quality category here for that quick start guide. CMS has really done a great job of putting these quick start guides together. And it's a great kind of one-stop shop to kind of wrap your head around participating in any of these categories. So for this year, it's worth 40% of your MIPS final score. Next year, it's been finalized to be worth 30%, which we expected. There are still over 200 quality measures to choose from, so that's fairly difficult to find those clinically relevant measures that you're scoring well in. Beware of any changed or removed measures from prior year. So again, you can continue to report on the same quality measures year to year, but just note that sometimes changes are made to those quality measures. Sometimes they're removed altogether. But the specifications of the measure might have changed from last year to this year. So just make sure that you understand any of those changes so that you're not surprised when you go to look at your data and it doesn't look like you thought it would. You have to select and report on a minimum of 6 individual quality measures. One has to be an outcome measure or a high priority measure. If fewer than 6 measures are clinically relevant to you or your specialty, you can report on the ones that are applicable. However, just be aware that CMS is going to use what's called the Eligible Measures Applicability, or EMA, process to confirm that you did not have clinically relevant measures available for you. So if they do agree with you, that category denominator is going to be appropriately lowered. So instead of, let's say you're being scored at 47 over 60, to get that score, the 60 meaning there were 6 clinically relevant measures worth a max of 10 points. If you only had 5 measures that were applicable to you and you submitted that score of 47, they agreed with you that there were only 5 clinically relevant measures, then that category denominator would be lowered to 50 because you only had those 5 measures. And so that 47 out of 50 is going to give you obviously a better score than 47 out of 60. Also, again, there are a whole bunch of specialty-specific measure sets available to you. CMS has tried to curate that huge list of measures and pulled out measures that they think are applicable to a wide range of medical specialties out there. Some of those specialty measure sets don't have 6 measures in them. Some of them have 20 measures. And so you can choose out of those 20 that CMS thinks are clinically relevant to you and report on 6 of those. If you go into if you look at your specialty measure set, and let's say it only has 3 or 4 measures in there, you can just report on those 3 or 4 measures in that measure set, and your denominator will be automatically lowered. And that's because CMS has already applied the EMA process to your medical specialty, and they already agree with you that there are fewer than 6 clinically relevant measures. Bonus points are still available for this year. Unfortunately, CMS is removing almost all of these bonus points for next year, but you can still take advantage of over-reporting this year. And this is a great way to kind of beef up your quality category score. It's unfortunate that CMS felt like they needed to remove these for next year, but certainly make sure that you're taking advantage of every single bonus point you possibly can for this year. This is where folks have really been able to increase their quality category score. So you get 2 points for each additional outcome or patient experience measure. You still get 1 point for other high priority measures, 1 point for each measure submitted using what's called end-to-end electronic reporting. What that is referencing is the method that you are using to submit your data to CMS. Some of them, like if you're reporting through your EHR, would qualify as that end-to-end electronic. And that means that there's no human intervention. Nobody's like manually keying in any data. So if you're using one of those electronic reporting methods, registries can often do that. Again, submitting through your EHR, or even getting that QRDA3 file, that quality data file from your EHR, and then uploading it to the CMS website yourself would also qualify. What wouldn't qualify for that is the submitting quality data through the claims process, because that's a very human process where somebody is keying in those quality data codes on those claims. That would not qualify. But again, still for this year, you can still get the end-to-end electronic reporting bonus. You also get a small practice bonus of 6 points. A small practice is defined as 15 or fewer Medicare billing clinicians under your tax ID. So if you have 15 or fewer of those, then CMS already sees you as a small practice, and they will automatically apply those 6 bonus points to your quality category. And they do cap those bonus points at an additional 10% of your denominator. So again, we're losing most of these next year, unfortunately, but certainly make sure that you're taking advantage of them this year. Data completeness is still an issue, as it should be. This is otherwise known as cherry picking out there in the field. So under this metric, CMS checks to see if you or your group have submitted data on a minimum percentage of your patients that meet a reported quality measures denominator criteria. So if you are simply not giving enough data on your quality measures for whom that measure applies in your patient panel, you could fail data completeness. Again, in 2021, those thresholds are 70%. And really the place where we see this the most, this issue the most, is in the claims-based quality submissions, where you could be forgetting to, excuse me, to be placing those quality data codes on the patients whom it should be on those claims. If you do that too much, you're going to fail the data completeness threshold, and measures that don't meet data completeness earn 0 points, regardless of that reported performance. Small practices, however, there's still a 3-point floor for really any of the quality measures that you're submitting. So you can't do worse than 3 points on a quality measure as a small practice, and that includes failing data completeness. Cost performance category really didn't see a lot of changes at all from last year to this year. It's worth 20% of that MIPS final score. Note that it is mandated through the legislation to be worth 30% in 2022, so that has been finalized. We've known that's been coming since the beginning of the program, that as of next year, quality and cost would be equally weighted at 30%. There's still no reporting requirement that data is pulled from your claims. The different measures that you're reporting on are the same as last year: the Medicare spending per beneficiary clinician measure, the total per capita cost measure. There are and there are 18 episode-based measures. We do have some new episode-based measures coming at us next year, but again, for this year, it's the same 18 as we had last year. So there's no new measures added, but just be aware that some of the specifications have changed for some of those measures. For instance, looping in the whole telehealth thing, which of course many clinicians have had to take advantage of due to the pandemic. In order to be scored on a cost measure, the ECA group must have enough attributed cases to meet or exceed that case minimum on those measures. If any one or more measures apply, they will constitute the total cost category score. And if no cost measures can be applied to an ECA group, that 20% category weight gets reallocated to the quality performance category, making cost worth 0 and quality worth 60 this year. Here is just for your reference. It kind of explains what those two overarching cost measures are. You can grab the slides and read this at your leisure. And here is the information on the 18 episode-based measures that we have. Again, I'm really just for your reference. I'm not going to go into and do any deep dive on the cost measures. If you are interested in learning more about these cost measures, click that link at the bottom of this slide. It's going to download a zip file that has a wealth of information on the cost category measures. Improvement activities, again, we've got that quick start guide. It's worth 15% of your MIPS final score. We have 105 improvement activities that you can choose from this year. You're selecting an activity, and then through the attestation process, you're attesting yes to having completed it or having it implemented for any continuous 90+ days in the calendar year. Each activity is weighted, and they earn points based on that weight. If you earn 40 points within the improvement category, you've earned all the points you can. And with that weighting, the medium weight is worth 10 points each. High weight improvement activities are worth 20 points. However, note that in small practices, non-patient facing clinicians, and the HIPSA clinicians as well receive double weighting on those, meaning medium weight are worth 20 points, high weight are worth 40 points. You max out at those 40 points, so really a small practice clinician can report on a single high weight activity, and they've maxed out all the points. They've earned everything they can for the improvement activities. They've modified a couple of improvement activities for this year. They also removed one. So same as in the quality category, while you can use the same improvement activities from year to year, you want to review the changes and determine whether a previously used improvement activity is still valid for this year. So just don't take it for granted that what you did last year is valid again for this year. You want to double check that. I also highly recommend that you grab the data validation file. I can't stress this enough, to get additional vital information on your chosen improvement activities and the CMS recommended audit documentation. So audits are coming. We know this. A lot of you are going to get audited based on what you put in for this year. Could be a year, 2, 3 years from now, but CMS is going to knock on your door on a certain percentage of clinicians. They're going to knock on those doors and say, prove to us that you had this improvement activity in place during calendar year 2021. If you cannot prove it retroactively, you're going to fail your audit. You don't want to do that because it could mean significant financial penalties coming your way. The data validation file is a fantastic resource for determining today what CMS is going to be looking for a few years from now. If you do not gather this information today to prove that that improvement activity was in place, you're probably not going to be able to find it 3 years from now. It's really hard to prove this stuff retroactively. So get that data validation file, look at the improvement activities you've chosen to report on this year, and at that audit documentation recommendations. So you get a clue at what CMS is going to accept as proof, and make sure that you capture that today so that you don't find yourself failing your audit a few years from now. Groups can also attest to an improvement activity when at least 50% of the clinicians in that TIN perform that same activity during any continuous 90-day period within the same performance year. So if you're reporting as a group, 100% of your clinicians don't have to have that improvement activity in place to get group credit for it. You need at least 50% of them doing it. They also don't have to do it for the same 90-day period as long as 50% of them each do it for that continuous 90 days within the calendar year. So it can be a different 90-day period. Promoting interoperability, again, the quick start guide is there for your reference. 25% of your MIPS final score. You have to be on 2015's edition certified EHR technology, or CERT as we call it. That's less of an issue today, thankfully, than it was even a year or two ago. Performance is based at the individual measure level. We've got 4 objectives with up to 7 measures to report on. We've got them listed there. Again, I'm not going to do a deep dive into the PI category, but if you want some information on each of those 7 measures, grab that link at the bottom of your screen for the measure specifications. Again, that's going to give you a zip file from CMS that's going to contain a bunch of great information on those measures. The query of prescription drug monitoring, or PDMP measure, is still available again this year. So it's an optional yes/no measure, but they've increased it now. It's worth 10 points instead of 5 points. You can now earn 10 points for it. And again, just a quick note, you don't, while in Michigan here, a lot of you are connecting your EHRs to MAPS, our state's PDMP. You don't have to have that integration to claim these bonus points. Really, the web version works for this too. So as you're going to write a prescription for a controlled substance, if you log into your MAPS website to double check to make sure that everything looks kosher there for issuing this prescription to the patient, that qualifies. So you do it once in the performance period, and you can claim yes to this and get those 10 bonus points. They did change the name of the support electronic referral loops by receiving and incorporating health information, by replacing the word incorporating with reconciling. And probably the most notable change under the PI category this year is this new optional HIE bidirectional measure. So in prior years, you have the 2 separate HIE measures where you're getting credit for sending summaries of care out when you're referring patients out, or when you have new patients coming in, or new referrals coming in, you're receiving those summaries of care, going out and looking for them and pulling them into your system. So those 2 measures still exist. You can still use those 2 as we have in prior years, but you might actually benefit from taking advantage of this new bidirectional measure, which earns you all 40 of the points all at once. However, really take a look at these statements that you would be attesting yes to earn those full 40 points. Not everybody can do this, but I know there are some clinicians out there working with some of the EHRs that are really highly integrated in this space with their HIEs, that I think can truly attest yes to these 3 statements. So, check with your vendor, talk to your HIE, determine if you are one of those people who can legitimately attest yes to this bidirectional measure. Again, because these 2 HIE measures on their own are really hard to score well in. So this is a good way to boost your PI category score if you can instead attest to this new bidirectional measure. But again, be careful. If you attest yes to it, make sure that you have adequate proof built into your audit file. Because a few years from now, if you get audited, CMS is going to ask you to prove that these statements were actually true for you. If you cannot produce that proof, you're going to fail your audit. We do have category reweighting under the PI category, again, just like we did last year. There is automatic reweighting, meaning CMS is already not expecting PI data from these clinicians or these special status types. So if you're in this list on your slide there in the top half, CMS is not expecting PI data from you. They're automatically reweighting the PI category to 0, shifting that weight over to the quality category. But you can easily override that automatic reweighting by submitting that PI data anyway. For some, it makes sense to do that, meaning their PI data looks great, but maybe their quality data isn't so great, so they can actually get a better MIPS final score by sending in that PI data anyway, even though CMS is not expecting it. There's also application-based reweighting. Again, it does the same thing, but you have to get that approved application for that to happen. And I highlighted here that small practices still fall under this application-based reweighting. That changes for next year. So as of next year, program year 2022, the small practice status is actually bumped up to the top half of the slide, and it's going to happen automatically. But for this year, it is still application based. So if you want this to happen as a small practice and you do not want to be scored in the PI category, and you want that to roll over to quality instead, put in that application. Takes really just a couple of minutes to get it in as a small practice. Again, there are some other reasons why you might look for that reweighting as well. That application link is there on your screen at the bottom. And again, you have until the end of the year to get that in. All right, let's talk briefly about the changes for MIPS APM participants. Really, it's just one major change to be aware of, and that is this new concept or this new option called the APP, or APM Performance Pathway. It is essentially the first of the MVPs that are coming at us. We won't see any other MVPs for a couple of years yet, but the APP is technically the first MVP that we have. It's available to all MIPS APM participants. However, it is required for the MSSP ACOs, which is still the vast majority of the ACOs out there are MSSP ACOs. So what this does really is it significantly opens up your options. So previously, as a MIPS APM participant, you were tied to your ACO's MIPS final score. Everything, all the data would roll up to the ACO level, and whatever the ACO scored in MIPS was going to be your score. So that's still in place. That is still an option for you as well. You can fall back on your APM or ACO score. However, that's not your only option anymore. You can actually still then individually participate in MIPS or participate at the group level. And when that happens, if that happens, CMS is going to look at the score that your ACO is generating for the whole group. And then they'll also look at the other data that you submit separately outside of your ACO to CMS. And they're going to award you with the better of the two scores. Most of the time we see these APMs getting really, really high scores. But I think there's others that are still struggling to gain their feet and get good MIPS final scores. If you are in one of those APMs, it might make sense to take advantage of this new option and submit your own individual clinician or group level data. And if you outperform your ACO, you're going to get that score instead. The category weights change a little bit, as you see on that graphic too. And one of the biggest significant changes under the APP is not only opening up those participation options, but it really revamps the whole quality category for these APMs as well, significantly reducing the number of measures that are being collected and scored for these ACOs. So we see what those, there's only 6 quality category scores or quality category measures that apply to under the APP now. You have those listed there. And really only 2 of them, or 3 of them are clinical quality measures that you'd be pulling that data from your EHR and sending on. So significant reduction. Medicare Shared Savings Program ACOs are required to use the APP, but they can still opt to use the CMS web interface for this year. I think that option is available again next year. So you see here the total number of ACO quality measures is significantly reduced. You were being scored on a whopping 23 measures in prior years. It goes all the way down to 6 under the APP. And the number of measures the ACO is actively required to report on also significantly reduced from 10 previously down to only 3. You got those enhanced MIPS reporting options that we talked about, where you can report at the individual and group level. And they've also opened up the EUC exception application to ACOs. That actually started last year, but it continues into this year as well. So again, as that MSSP ACO MIPS reporting options, you are required to participate within the APP. So your ACO MIPS score is still going to be generated on your behalf using the APP quality submission, the PI category weighted across all the TINs that are participating in that ACO, and you'll automatically get full credit as that MIPS APM, as that ACO participant. Then you can also submit traditional MIPS on your own at the individual or group level. and you're going to be submitting data across all 4 of those performance categories. And again, as I mentioned, CMS is going to award you with the higher of those 2 scores. Performance thresholds, we did as expected. As we see each year, we see that minimum performance threshold increasing from one year to the next. It was 45 points last year to avoid a penalty. It's 60 points this year. They did not change the additional performance threshold for that exceptional performance, so that's at 85 points again this year as it was last year, and the payment adjustment is the same also. We're actually at the max that it could be right now, and we're not going to see that change. So it's plus or minus that 9%. But to ensure that budget neutrality that is built into this program, the positive MIPS payment adjustments will be increased or decreased by an amount called the scaling factor. And this is really what has devastated those top-end gains for those exceptional performers in prior years. And unfortunately, we're going to see the same thing happen again this year, especially with that automatic EUC being applied again this year. It's going to mean a lot of folks taking a pass on participating, and we need negative adjustments to pay for those positive adjustments. So by kind of wiping out the majority of those negative adjustments that we would see based on actual clinic performance, we're just not going to see that good pool of money on the negative side to pay out really good dividends on the positive side. So again, where you want to be at a minimum if you are participating this year is at 60. Make sure that you are at least there, so you get into this positive part and you get to take advantage of the folks that are getting those negative adjustments. And then really where you want to be is at 85 points and above. So you can take advantage of that additional performance threshold and the monies there. Those monies are not part of that budget neutrality. There's actually separate funds set aside to pay out to those exceptional performers. So make sure that you are in that best state where you are above 85 points. So that performance threshold has increased incrementally each year. You can see on this graphic what that range of scores means this year. For next year, that performance threshold, the number in the green box on your screen, must be based on the mean or median of final scores for all MIPS eligible clinicians in a previous year. That's part of the original MACRA legislation that gave us the quality payment program. So as of next year, that minimum performance threshold has actually been set at 75 points, which we kind of predicted. I knew it was going to be somewhere in the 70s. It has been finalized. And that exceptional performance threshold, which next year is the final year of that, has been increased a little bit to 89 points. So as of next year, you have to achieve scores that were previously considered exceptional performance just to avoid a significant Medicare penalty. With that, I just have a couple more slides and I'm almost out of time. I did want to call your attention to the free technical assistance, the free help that we are here and ready and willing and really want to provide for you. It's a complex program. You do not have to participate on your own. CMS is still out there funding these technical assistance contractors. Altarum is one of them that can provide free technical service, free program assistance to those small practices out there. To join up with us, click the qppresourcecenter.org link at the bottom of that slide and click the Join Now button. Unfortunately, our help is coming to an end early next year. So our contract with CMS actually expires on February 15th. So unless something changes, and at this time, I am not seeing CMS making a move on this, our help is going to stop, or at least our free help is going to stop as of the middle of February. So there's still time to get to us. We would really love to continue helping you with this beyond the end of that contract, but make sure that you are, soaking us for all the questions, all the information you can get out of us before our contract ends with CMS. Part of that free technical assistance for those small practices also gives you access to MIPScast, which is our proprietary scoring tool. So we know exactly what CMS is going to do with your data. We know how they're going to score it. And we've created this tool to act as kind of a sandbox for you. So you can give us your data all year long, and we'll work with you to kind of understand what it means. We can tell you what that data set's going to score if you go ahead and submit it to CMS when the data submission period opens next year. And MIPScast is actually a qualified registry as well, which means we can work with you all year, fine-tune your data, make sure we get it to be the best that it can be, and then we can submit that data on your behalf. With your permission, of course, we will not send it to CMS without a sign-up process for that service, but that's available to you for free as well as a small practice. So, work with us, we'll fine-tune your data, get it in a good spot, and then we will submit it to CMS on your behalf, and you don't have to do anything when it comes time to data reporting. Also, I just want to take note of a few other programs we have here at Altarum that might be of interest to you and your clinicians. We have the Healthy Hearts for Michigan program that is addressing cardiovascular disease in our state. We have the Michigan Sustained Patient-Centered Alcohol-Related Care, otherwise known as MySpark, that might be of interest. That is addressing Michigan's unhealthy alcohol use. And we also have a program called Reframing Optimal Management of Pain and Opioids in Older Adults, otherwise known as ROMPO, that we're recruiting for as well, that looks to help with some educational programming and helping providers to respond to the unique challenges when caring for older patients who have pain. So if any of those programs are of interest to you and you want to learn more, just click on the hyperlinks in your slide deck that you can download, and you can learn more and then contact Altarum, and we'd be happy to work with you on those programs as well. With that, I'm going to wrap up for the day. Surprisingly, I actually didn't get any questions in the questions box. Note that we love answering your questions. If you have questions for us going forward, don't hesitate to reach out. You've got my information, my email, and my office number there. You've got that link to the QPP Resource Center and also to our general info line. You can hammer us with all the questions you can come up with, at least until our contract runs out early next year. And we'd really be happy to help you with the program. Make sure you've got everything you need to perform well in the program again this year. With that, I am going to sign off for the day. Looks like I went about 3 minutes over. I apologize for that. I think thanks to the 15 folks that are still hanging on with me here. Have a great rest of your day. And again, let us help you in this program. We really, really, truly love helping folks in this space, and we want to make sure that you have everything you need to do well in MIPS this year. So don't hesitate to reach out to contact me if we can help you in any way, shape, or form with any of this. And with that, have a good rest of your day. Thank you.